This piece alone feels like it weighs a lot. It is extremely hot. All right, we're back here with the dart. Last time you saw this, you saw us put the engine and trans in, test fit it. There was two fairly large issues that we didn't like, so we're gonna address those right now. One being that we had the motor in and it fit. It was a little tight with the oil pan that we had. We had a Trailblazer SS oil pan. It fit, but should I ever want to go to a bigger transmission like a 4L80 over a Turbo 350, the tunnel clearance would have been really tight because we had the motor up high to clear the steering. So here's the oil pan, and I'll show you the difference in the new one. This is the Trailblazer oil pan where the steering lies. It's 3 to 4 inches thick versus the aftermarket one that I have installed is about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches total. So that oil pan has a much lower rear clearance for where it clears the steering. The next thing is the accessory drives. They are super high. We didn't have them on last time. I put them on just to show you. They're super high mounted. The tensioner, the alternator, this massive aluminum bracket that GM uses to hold the alternator. We're not using air conditioning, so we don't need the AC, this bracket or the tensioner. We're not using power steering, so I don't need power steering. And this bracket and this alternator mount is just excessive for just mounting an alternator, and it's too high. So we'll take these off and we'll give you an idea what it's going to look like and what we're going to do to... I just have these stuck on here quick. This piece alone feels like it weighs a lot. So you're left with your crank balancer, your water pump, and all I need else is an alternator. GM, they had the alternator up here. So on the LS blocks, this hole is not drilled or tapped. I drilled that hole and tapped it. I think it's 10 millimeter, 1.5 thread, I forget. Did that so that I could simply bolt on that alternator. That's where the alternator is going to go, just like that. Now the water pump is a whole different issue. It would be nice if you could just run a belt around the outside of the three, like a V-belt, and be done with it. But a serpentine water pump needs to spin clockwise, opposite the crank rotation. So you need to run this pulley on the back side of the serpentine belt. So I'm going to rig up a little system to do just that, where the crank's going to run the alternator off this back section of belts that was for the AC compressor, and the front ribs are going to run the water pump with I'm going to make 2 plates and mount 2 pulleys right here to just run that, and I'm going to use a stretch belt on both so there won't be any tensioners. So we'll mock up some plates and make some brackets and do a quick video of that. Alright, so here's a plate we made. This plate bolts to the water pump holes, and here's a pedestal, and there's a nut in there with a washer. This is the part where the idler will bolt to. So this will go on the water pump, and then this will hold the idler in line with the water pump and crank pulley. So we're going to gusset this a little bit so that it's stronger and won't fatigue with the belt tension. All right, so here's what we came up with. They are fully built, but not fully welded. I will fully weld them after it's all done and mocked up. But you can see they're both the water pump flange pattern, and they'll be held on by the water pump bolts. All right, we're back at the engine. Here's the brackets that we made, and let's put them on and show you how they work. Ooh, that one's hot. These are the two pulleys that I'm going to use for now. They are smooth pulleys, not ribbed. I do have ribbed pulleys in case I need to switch to them, but I'm going to run the ribbed side of the belt on a smooth pulley. Many people don't know that that can be done, but they do it on OEM cars. These pulleys are actually from an OEM car, and they already have 100,000 miles on them. You can see where the belt has been riding on it. So I'm doing this because I'm not using a belt tensioner, so it's going to be a stretch belt. I want it to go on easier. And if I have a problem with them coming off, then I'll switch to one, if not two ribbed pulleys. But for now, I'm going to put the smooth pulley on and run it that way and see how it goes. These are a collared stepped bolt. That collar is what centers the pulley. There you have it. Like I said, I may need to switch to these or may not. So the belt is going to just route around the outside under the pump back up. And like I said, it's going to be a stretch belt. So you could have bought a clockwise rotating water pump. They're over $400. That's the reason I didn't do it. Or you could have gone to an electric water pump. Then again, they're over $400 and you need to get a remote mounted thermostat and all that, so that's quite expensive. You know, these I had these pulleys, so basically I'm $0 into this. But the OEM water pump has the built-in thermostat. They're actually really good water pumps. They last a long time. People don't think they do because they leak, but it's not them that are leaking. These gaskets leak behind these water pumps all the time at very low mileage. The water pumps last hundreds of thousands of miles. I just did them on my other car, and all I did is take these bolts out, pulled the water pump off, slipped in new gaskets, and bolted it back on. I didn't even disconnect any rad hoses, just the belt and the 6 bolts to hold the water pump on. New gaskets, and it's back on the road. It has well over 200,000 miles on the original water pump. So that's another reason I'm sticking with the OEM pump. So I'm going to throw up some mock-up belts and just show you what the routing looks like. All right, here it is all mocked up. The alternator is going to use a small 4-rib belt from the air conditioning. I'll have to get the correct size belt. And then if you need to shim the alternator to get the pulley a little more in line, you can put washers behind the alternator. And then here's the serpentine belt. It actually came out really nice. Same thing, I have to get a belt, but simply runs down. These 2 idlers apply tension to the water pump. This leaves me tons of room up top for whatever may be going on up there, and keeps the alternator low and out of the way. So it looks really slick. I got, like I said, other than the belt, I'm going to be $0 into it. I know and trust the water pumps, and I'm going to drive the car on the street, so I don't want to be dealing with an unreliable electric water pump. I'm not too sure how well those work, but here it is. All right, so now that we have switched the oil pans to make more clearance, and we have changed around the front accessory drives. We're only running 2 accessories instead of 4. Now we're gonna go ahead and start working on the motor mounts. We're gonna set it back in and see how it goes. We're gonna try these first. These are simply the original motor mounts with the rubber part and the second piece of the bracket cut off. As you can see, this is the original motor mount from the trucks, and this is the portion of it that bolts to the block with everything cut off. So we're gonna mount these on and see where things line up to the frame rails and see what we're gonna do. There's a good chance I'm going to solid mount this motor because I'm not really building it to be a smooth street car. So we'll see how things line up. So from the factory, they would bolt on like this, which gives you, it's not completely flat, but it's pretty close to being flat. On the other side, it's looking like I may end up trying to mount them this way if I can and build off of this. But for now, we're going to stick them on the way they came and see what lines up. Maybe I'll switch them in the car because these are really just going to be something to try and build from. There's no way that these are going to do anything the way they are. All right. All right, the motor's in. It's about where it needs to be, roughly. We may adjust it a little bit here and there if we have to. The problem I ran into now is that the oil dipstick tube comes out pretty much in line with the motor mount plate here on the frame. So that's already as far back as it can go, and then the motor mount here needs to come forward, but then again, if I come forward, it's going to be in the way of the dipstick tube. So I just made a plate here that I'm going to put on there, and then I'll have to run some brace on the back side of it, and then I will make some type of spacer that will be the motor mount, even though it's going to be solid mounted. So it'll be like this. I'll gusset this, and then I'll gusset the back side, and that's how it's going to mount. Awesome. All right, so the motor's in. It's sitting on our motor mounts that we have just tacked up. We're going to now pull it out so that we can finish welding the motor mounts completely, and we'll get a better look at what we did. Okay, the motor's out, so you can get a better look at the mocked up motor mounts. They're needing to be finished with gussets and bracing, but for the most part you can see how they're going to be. We're going to box in the subframe here and finish up all the welding, and then put the motor back in so we can build a transmission crossmember. All right, we got the engine back in, got the motor mounts cleaned up and mostly welded so they're a little sturdier. Got some of the accessories on. We're gonna put it in the air and build a cross member so that the motor is in its final resting place so we can start building the rest of the stuff around it. All right, here we go. All right, so here's the original holes for the original cross member. It would run through here. My trans mount's a little further forward than that. I'm just gonna take a piece of angle and mount it to the trans and build off of that. I'm gonna solid mount the trans as I did the motor mounts. So I'm gonna mount this and then go from there. Boy. Perfect, I think. All right, so we're gonna make 4 plates and put them on each side of the frame rail to make the cross member attached to. I probably should just buy a cross member, but I don't have one, so I'm gonna make one. So I'm gonna put this up here and hopefully clamp it in place here, like so. And then we're gonna use a transfer punch. This will slide down the tube and center punch the plates. I know where to drill so that these holes won't be off center. So I can drill them and they'll line right up. Very light dimples, but I can make them, you know, deeper and then drill them. So we'll go do that. All right, this is it. Trans mount made for the most part. May put some more gussetings and box these in, since this is a torsion bar car. The torsion bar really torques on this portion of the body. So it's in. Both the motor and trans mounts are in and pretty much done. So we're gonna let the car down and see how it sits with all the weight on it.